It's time to get rowdy with Rusty this week in wrestling on That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout.
Hello, it's time once again for another exciting edition of That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout for May 3rd, 2020, episode 8. And a few housekeeping matters before we get started. Please indulge me for a minute. Special thanks to Rachel from In This Corner and In This Corner discussion group from Facebook. She talked this week about this show here, That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout, and was very positive about the show. Also, another shout out to former professional wrestler Gene Ligon, who also had some good things. We'll talk about Gene later on, I think, or next week at the latest. And just thanks to everybody, even if I didn't mention your name, for the positive feedback that we've had regarding That Way Cool Wrestling Show, as well as this show here, That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout. So be sure to subscribe to the DJB Productions Network so you get all the programming on this wonderful podcast network on YouTube, and not just the wrestling stuff. So with all that said, now that I've kissed enough ass, here we go with episode number 8. We start this week with Dark Side of the Ring, Dr. D, David Schultz, and the slap heard round the world. Dr. D, David Schultz, was originally trained by Herb Welch, who is part of the Fuller family. Fuller was their wrestling name, but their real name was Welch. Fuller being Herb Welch was the father of Colonel Robert Parker, a.k.a. Robert Fuller, and his brother Ron Fuller, who also has a podcast. And so the Welch family goes back decades in professional wrestling. And so David Schultz was trained by them, and he was trained to uphold kayfabe and protect the business at all costs. Long story short, it was a career retrospective about David Schultz, but the main part of the thing was about the 1980s 2020 magazine show for ABC Network, where ABC wanted to expose the business. David Schultz had left the AWA and come to the WWF at the time to work a program with Hulk Hogan. The WWF was on fire. Vince McMahon, according to David Schultz, come in the dressing room and said something about, hey, David, we've got a guy out here trying to make fun of the business. Stay in character as Dr. D and play the heel and everything, and see what this guy wants and basically straighten him out. That was my words, not David Schultz's words. And so David Schultz came out, did a heel interview with John Stossel. At sort of the end of the interview, Stossel says, I'm going to ask you the standard question. Is wrestling fake? And at that point, David said that he thought in his mind, now, if some reporter had asked Dr. D, is wrestling fake, what would Dr. D do? And so at that point, David admits that he slapped John Stossel. Stossel falls to the ground. Stossel then gets back up, and David Schultz hits him again, which I don't think the second slap was shown on Dark Side of the Ring, but I remember that documentary and I've seen it several times. He slapped him twice. Stossel said he had nerve damage in the ear and sued and won a bunch of money. I think it was $250,000 or something like that. So it was a real good documentary. David Schultz still comes off as pissed off. There's obviously heat between him and Vince McMahon and now WWE. So I doubt you'll ever see David Schultz in the WWE Hall of Fame. Moving on, a longtime pro wrestler / backstage agent, Gerald Briscoe, who I met with Jim Crockett Promotions in the 1970s when I was sitting in the dressing room with Jerry Briscoe and Les Thatcher and many others in the Mid-Atlantic territory, was released this week by WWE as a cost-cutting measure. He had been with them since approximately 1984, when him and his brother Jack Briscoe sold their interest in Georgia Championship Wrestling to Vince McMahon, and that's what created Black Saturday. And you know the rest of the story. Also, Zack Ryder was released from WWE, as well as Kurt Hennig Jr., better known to you WWE fans as Curtis Axel. Curtis Axel was actually released last week, but I forgot that part. From a lady's perspective, Deonna Purrazzo was also released. She is real good friends with Britt Baker, so expect Zack Ryder as well as Deonna Purrazzo to show up in AEW. Deonna Purrazzo, if you guys hadn't seen her, is a real good worker. She was trained by another guy I once knew, Rip Rogers. So and she's part of the Monster Factory training school as well in the past. So Deonna Purrazzo really knows her stuff. Moving right along, during an investors call, Vince McMahon said that until further notice, WWE would be taping all of their programming in Florida. And during that investors call, he said that the WWE for this quarter had a profit margin of $291 million with $24 million in profit. So excuse me, Mr. McMahon, if you had $24 million in profit, why are you letting everybody go, you greedy fool? Anyway, moving right along, ROH Booker and wrestler Marty Scurll, in talking about AEW and his friends at AEW this week, I said that there is talks about a future partnership between ROH and AEW, but that probably will not come until after the pandemic mess is over. And by the way, let me back up and tell you that in case you guys are wondering, why does the stupid guy have the belt around his neck? Well, as a guy in a wheelchair with cerebral palsy, this is how handicapped people have to hold their belt so we don't drop the shit on live camera. Anyway, moving right along, there are continuing rumors by a longtime wrestler, Dirty Dutch Mantel. You WWE people will know him as Zeb Coulter. He came out on the internet this week and said that he continues to hear sale rumors. I've heard that for a number of years. That's one of those things, I'll believe it when I see it. I find it hard to believe that anybody named McMahon, whether it be Vince, Stephanie, or Triple H, or anybody else in the family, will ever let go of WWE. But it continues to happen. So there might be smoke where there's fire. The two corporations that are now interested in maybe bidding for the sale is ESPN and Fox. But I've also heard that Vince McMahon has had conversations with Disney. So only time will tell whether there is a WWE sale or not. With the UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship being sold several years ago for $4 billion, a sale from the McMahon family to someone else is probably not out of the question. It's just a matter of time. And with wrestling, you never say never. So moving right along, we move into NWA. NWA had a prepackaged show this week where a lot of their footage was back from 2017 when Billy Corrigan bought it and hired David Lagana, and they started to rebirth the NWA. So for you guys that haven't seen it, go back and check out this week's episode of NWA on YouTube, and you'll see a lot of video from 2017 to the present and how they started to rebuild the brand when Billy Corrigan bought it in 2017. And they continue to promote NWA Superpower, which is a pay-per-view like style program coming with the NWA in May of 2020. More details on that as it becomes available. Moving right along, PWI, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the longtime magazine, had a tweet come out on April 3rd, 2020, that they recognize the WWE Championship, the WWE Universal Championship, the AEW Championship, and the New Japan Pro Wrestling / IWGP Championship, and that they have no longer recognized the Impact title or the TNA title as a world championship. Now, they first did this in 2015, but we didn't have a podcast in 2015. So I'm bringing it up this week because PWI was responding to a tweet by a fan, one of these marks that say, why don't you promote Impact more? PWI doesn't feel that Impact is really a good promotion and that the title is not really a world title. And so they reminded that fan that they stopped promoting the Impact / TNA title back in 2015. Moving right along to AEW. Show open this week with Jericho and Shivani. Jericho is still showing you why he's the best on the mic. There's talk within the industry that Jericho will have his last match very soon, and they are thinking about bringing in his longtime partner who he broke into the business with, Lance Storm. So not sure whether it be Lance Storm or some other current contracted wrestler, but usually Jericho will get his way. So I suspect that it'll be Lance Storm being brought in to wrestle Jericho in the near future, if this is the end of the in-ring career for Jericho. But all signs point to Jericho being maybe a commentator or backstage agent once his in-ring career is over. We move on to the TNT Championship tourney. By the way, thanks to Danny J for tipping me off about the Impact title not being recognized by PWI, because Danny J and anybody that knows me for longer than 5 minutes knows that I always say that Impact is a dead brand. So thank you very much, Danny J and all the staff at the big show, That Way Cool Wrestling Show. Thank you for that. Moving on to AEW, the TNT Championship tourney. Cody, who is now, ironically, let me stop there for a minute. Cody went by Cody with the introductions, and then right at the end, the ring announcer, whose name escapes me, she's not important anyway, referred to him as Cody Rhodes. So I'll have more details next week right here on That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout as to whether Cody Rhodes has stolen another trademark from the WWE and got the Cody Rhodes name back. I'll research that this week and get in touch with you next week. Anyway, the Cody versus Darby Allin match was a great match, 3 out of 5 stars. Darby Allin continues to show why he is a star. He is not a rising star. He is a star right now. Moving right along, another Scorpio Sky, sort of part 2. Scorpio Sky video aired that talked about his career, his problems growing up, and having a hard time being a black man breaking into the industry. The video was 5 stars. Keith Mitchell, who I met one time, is behind the scenes there in AEW, and Keith Mitchell and Dan Bynum and all those guys there. I never met Dan Bynum, but he's Keith Mitchell's right-hand man. They go back to each other's days in world-class championship wrestling, so they always put together good videos, and they worked in WCW before WCW closed down. Moving right along, we then move on to MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman video from his house as he recovers from a hangnail and says that he is battling through his hangnail injury and will return to AEW very soon. But while his hangnail has had a miraculous recovery, he accidentally nicked his neck. So now he is having a neck injury. So best of luck on your recovery, MJF. And I don't mind saying, next to being a Cindy Snow mark, I'm also an MJF mark as well. MJF continues to show why he's the best in the business. Moving on, Wardlow versus Jobber match. I'm not going to bother you with that. Danny J would say skip over that. So all I'm going to say is that is my P-break match of the week. 2 stars, and of course Wardlow wins. Then we get the stupid WWE type programming on AEW with the Bubbly Bunch. I don't care for it. 1 star. Kip Sabian and Jimmy Havoc versus Best Friends was a 3-star match. Best Friends wins. Then we cut to a Britt Baker video. I love Britt Baker as a wrestler, but Britt Baker as a heel and a commentator is getting, as a heel interviewer is getting better, but it's still 1 star. We then see Shawn Spears, the former Ty Dillinger in WWE versus Jobber, 1 star. We then move on to Marco Stunt video and interview, which was awful. Marco Stunt can't talk. I'm not saying nothing about his shortness because I'm a guy in a wheelchair. So I'm not against Marco Stunt for being small. I'm against Marco Stunt for not being able to talk. We then see a Marco Stunt versus the Exalted One. I thought I was the Exalted One, but any damn way. The Exalted One, Brody Lee. Brody Lee wins, just absolutely destroys the hell out of Marco Stunt, but it was only a 1-star match. We could have, that was a close tie for the P-Break, but the Wardlow match won my P-Break award for this week. Moving right along, we then see a John Moxley video, which was shot away from the arena, sort of in a lower income neighborhood, in which Moxley talks about troubled times in the country right now, and he will be live on AEW next week. Lastly, we then move on to the main event, TNT Championship semifinal match between Lance Archer and Dustin Rhodes. Archer dominates a bloody Dustin. Dustin was juicing like all get out. There was blood all over the mat and everywhere else. At the end of the match, Cody and others from the Nightmare family, such as Michael Collardi, who wrestles as QT Marshall, and Brandy comes down to aid Dustin. There is still talk that Dustin will retire soon and go full-time at the AEW Training Center, which is ran by Dustin and QT Marshall somewhere in Georgia, but more on that as the details become available. During the show, AEW continued to promote their next pay-per-view, which will be May 23rd, Double or Nothing 2 pay-per-view, and it will be Cody versus Archer for the TNT Championship. Only the top stuff next from NXT. We've got Swerve versus Phantasma in an interim TNT tournament match. 3 stars, but Phantasma is a superstar. Candice LeRae and Johnny Gargano as her manager continue to have great chemistry since they're real life husband and wife. LeRae wins with a 4-star match. Next, we see women's champ Charlotte Flair from the WWE main roster down in NXT versus Mia Yim. I usually don't like women's matches. I agree with Danny J on that, but it turned out to be a 3-star match. We then see a second time of Drake Maverick, because it's like a double elimination tournament, versus Tony Nese for the interim cruiserweight title. Drake Maverick wins this one and ties the thing up at 1-1. We then move on to North American champ Keith Lee versus Damian Priest, the former Punishment Martinez in Ring of Honor. Lee wins with a 4-star match, but overall the show was not great. This is why I gave you only the tough stuff. Lastly, from NXT, Velveteen Dream, better known as Patrick Clark, and if that name sounds familiar, Patrick Clark was a Tough Enough contestant from the most recent Tough Enough series years ago. He did not win. He was eliminated pretty much early on in the show, but he kept in touch with people and they gave him a job, so that Patrick Clark is Velveteen Dream. Velveteen Dream is currently in hot water with NXT and WWE for allegedly sending lewd pictures of himself to a female minor. Clark has denied the allegations and said that his account was hacked. And even if that was true, this is my come on man moment of the week. Come on, man. If you don't take pictures like that, then you don't have to worry about your account getting hacked. But anyway, we'll have to see how that turns out. And one other note that Danny J brought up to me earlier before we recorded this podcast. Tessa Blanchard, due to travel restrictions over in another country, was unable to get to the Impact Rebellion show this week. So they brought back the TNA brand and the TNA title and had sort of a tournament so that they'd have a world championship on the show. It got great ratings from Access TV. Access TV went to Impact/TNA and says, we want more TNA. So it looks like you're going to have an Impact World Championship and a TNA World Championship match at some point. Moose is a star. Tessa Blanchard is a star. I wish they would get out of Impact and come to a product that really matters, but that's just my opinion. Lastly, moving on to MLW, episode number 108. Only 3 highlights here. They promote an MLW anthology series coming soon, which will air next week, which will show you MLW matches and other information about MLW dating all the way back from 2002. So if you guys are not familiar with MLW, this might be a good time to check out the MLW product, either on BN Sports, if you have that BEIN, BN Sports, on your cable network channel system, or if you don't have BN Sports, check it out on YouTube. I was listening to Busted Open Radio earlier today from a few days ago, and backstage interview, Alicia Atut, I think is how you pronounce her name, said that MLW will have the anthology show and another show coming soon as well, since they are unable to tape matches due to the coronavirus issues as a safety precaution for their performers. So they did have matches this week that weren't too good. It was Lucha Libre stuff. But as of next week, they're doing that anthology show and then another show which will take the place of the matches until this coronavirus stuff is over. We then move on and see Davey Boy Smith Jr. Talking about reuniting the New Heart Foundation with Brian Pillman Jr. and what Smith is planning to do against Jacob Fatu. Fatu is a star and in real life is part of the Samoan family with lineage all the way back to The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. We then see Killer Cross as the leader of the Contra unit. A video aired and Killer Cross is vowing war against MLW in the future. Lastly, we see Mance Warner cuts a promo on Alex Hammerstein. Mance is a star in the making, sort of a modern day Steve Austin. The actual wrestling in MLW seems to be great most weeks. So I encourage all of you to watch MLW. It's a great product. Well, that's going to do it for me, Rusty Loudermilk. I'm out of here. Keep it right here on the DJB Productions Network, not only for That Way Cool Wrestling Show, but also That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout and all of the other programming, the Man Cave, and all the other stuff. I can't remember all the shows, but if you subscribe to the channel, you'll pretty much always get the great programming right here on the DJB Productions Network. Until then, we'll see you next week. Stay safe, everybody, and keep pro wrestling alive. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to That Way Cool Wrestling Show Breakout. We'll see you at the matches. Goodbye, everybody.